It's a bit of a treat today. I've been joined by Kerry Parkin. Kerry, thank you um, for coming on here and really sharing your story and going through some questions. So I'm very grateful to you for your time, because I know you're an extremely busy lady.
Oh, thanks for having me, Susie. And always an opportunity to share story and share experience is always a good thing. So thanks for having me.
Well, bless you. And that is the reason why we started doing these. It's about sharing your experience and your journey, and ultimately those kind of tidbits of advice that may help someone else. So, a quick context for anyone who may not be familiar with your background. So, you're the founder and chief exec of the Remarkables, which is a hugely successful global comms agency. And I know you'll explain a bit more about that, but 3 decades of experience in comms, working with some pretty mega brands. I could see Microsoft, Virgin, FMCG with Pernod Ricard. You've got Costa Coffee, Nokia. So some huge global corporations. And I know you'll probably tell us a bit about some of the work that you've done on there. But I thought it would make sense if we start really on your kind of career journey so far. Would you be so kind just to share a bit more with our audience on your career journey so far? What are some of those decisions that really helped prepare you for the senior level that you achieved?
No, thanks, Susie, for that lovely warm intro. Very kind. So I think first of all, ever since I left university in 99, I always had a plan. I'm a bit of a planner. And I
Okay.
always understood for myself what the spine of my career needed to look like. And that evolved, but usually there'd be a 3 or 5 year plan, which would take me to the next step and the next step and the next step. And it started in-house with Virgin. They're moving to Microsoft. As you said, they're moving to Pernod Ricard, which was 4 years and an international job. Then moving back to the UK and another international job with Costa. But each of those steps really were very well considered, and they were against a plotted view of where I wanted to be in the end. And where I really see my destination in corporate life was chief comms officer or a global comms director, sat at the C-suite table internationally, not just domestically. That's where I knew I wanted to be in life. Now, I did that and I achieved that and I climbed that ladder, did a couple of trampoline sessions in the middle of it, but actually got to the top and to the top table and was very happy. But the reality is there were teams of 75 people and big agendas and private founders or equity backed founders, and all of that created a level of responsibility that once achieved, it felt like I had nowhere else left to go. And so that's actually when I left traditional corporate life, once I got to that top of that ladder, and then decided to open my own business and actually open a business I wish I could have hired myself.
Mhm.
All of the agencies I'd worked with over the course of my career had great strengths, but a lot of weaknesses. And at the end of the day, I wanted to address those weaknesses and start something myself. But as I said, that's all been part of somewhat of a plan. And along the way, recognizing and actually working with founders like yourself and executive search about thinking where are my weaknesses? How do I build breadth and depth in both my subject matter discipline, but equally as a business leader perspective? And really, that's how I built my way to the top table, was making sure I understood my topic, my industry, my sector, but also understood business and the commercial reality of business. And that's how I built my skills to get to that top table.
Wow. Did you really have that clearer plan from the beginning?
Yes, it's very strange. I met when I was very young, I met the comms director of what was then Virgin Mobile, a phenomenal gentleman who gave me a lot of time as a mentor. And very early on, he said, you need to know your destination, otherwise your path becomes unclear.
That's
And
true.
so for me, I was like, oh, you are spectacular. I want to be you when I grow up. That's what I want to be as a grown up. And he was very kind in helping me unpack the levels of experience I would need in order to attain that. And also helped me understand that I was not going to get there within my 10-year time frame that I had in my head, because that wouldn't give me the level of life experience,
Yeah.
gravitas, an understanding of what to do when things didn't go well, or how to curate relationships and stakeholders and councils internally. He really helped me understand that it was going to be achieving that role would be a product of all of my life experience, not just what was on my CV. And so from then I started to calculate 5 to 10 years out. Moving to Australia was a calculated move. I wanted to get international experience. And there was a lot of very big jobs in a much shorter talent pool there. So that was a strategic decision made. But then the next decisions around moving internationally, broadening those international roles, getting deeper into crisis, then campaigning, and then deeper into business commercial, investor relations, and public affairs, adding all of those on through the course of my career enabled me to become a much more broader set of skills for that top table with very in-depth sector expertise. So yeah, being very curious, I think, but being very meaningful in what I chose was very important to me.
Wow, you flag for all the character traits of a high performer as you're listing that through. So looking at that, then, if you're thinking of, what do aspiring senior leaders? So you had that fortunate scenario, met this amazing chap who really kind of influenced your journey, and you're on here to do the same for others now. So what do aspiring senior leaders, in your view, potentially underestimate about stepping up to that level?
Yeah, it's a great question, Susie. I think there's three important things that people really need to consider when they want to aspire to that level. The first is you are a commercial leader first and a discipline leader second. So I always knew when I started to get to that point where I wanted to reach the top table, if I couldn't talk about the numbers, if I didn't understand the business numbers, if I didn't understand the business strategy, if I couldn't talk confidently about the commercial future of the business, I was not going to succeed in that. I was going to have a very difficult time convincing stakeholders of the necessary investment, ROI, and role of my function within that business. So the first thing I did was invest behind doing some commercial courses. You don't have to do an MBA, Susie. You don't have to do a mini MBA, but you need to do some really thoughtful, commercially grounded courses which help you understand the commercial underlying of a business. So that's what I did first of all. The second is I curated around me. I remember the role I was in. I remember the business I was in. And it was there that I made the jump over 4.5 years from manager to director and sitting at the top table. And what I did during that period was I assembled what I would call my cheerleaders. So people who would vouch for me in a room that I'm not in.
Mm-hmm.
I assembled my council. So this was a group of very senior C-suite executives across the business, internationally and domestically, where I could road test concepts, thoughts, and ideas in a really confident, calm manner before taking them and tripping up elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then I had my coach and my mentor internally as well. And between all four, they were able to help me navigate a course to that top table. So I think we really underestimate stakeholder management as being a core critical skill, and understanding who your advocates are and your detractors and mobilizing them in a way that helps you get to where you need to be or get the work off the ground that needs to be done. So that was my second big thing. And then my third thing was really understanding how to talk less and listen more, which when you're a communicator is really difficult because you're protecting reputation of entire international business, but you want to have a view, but actually learning those skills of being very active listeners, playing back what I understood to be true, checking in with on my team, checking in with my stakeholders, made me a much better communicator. And so I think those three things combined is what elevated me more quickly to the C-suite and kept me there for longer as well.
That's fascinating. I frequently will recommend to people your idea of having your champions, your counsel, your kind of coaches and mentors, and being really strategic and proactive about it as well. I mean, that's the kind of textbook approach that you took. Based on your experience of the promotions that you had through your career, how can people position themselves internally as credible successes? How do they position themselves, so that obvious choices.
Interestingly, I've taken 2 demotions in my career, Susie. And
Okay.
that strategically to get ahead in
Mhm.
other industries or other businesses. So sometimes promotions will do that work, and sometimes lateral moves or taking a step down to grow will also do that for you, in my experience anyway. I think for me, one of the very valuable pieces of advice I had from the then General Counsel at Pernod Ricard was stop waiting for permission to receive and adopt the role. So take on the responsibilities, act like you're already in the role, act like this is something you can do quite knowledgeably and confidently. Assume the job description before it's been offered to you. And then play back all of those successes. We can't underestimate our own internal PR, especially as women. We really struggle with it. And again, those stakeholders, those advocates, champions, councils, they're there to do that job too, but you need to give them the equipment with which to do it with. So for me, that was really some of the best advice I had, because I also had a manager who didn't. He was a lovely chap. Don't get me wrong, but as a skill set, as a competency and capability, I was better equipped. And so, how did I also help him grow was one of my missions too. Um, and look, as I said, some of them worked, some of them didn't, but it became pretty clear to me very early on of that intuition about going, this isn't going to work out for me, or I won't get to that point here. And understanding when that is as well is really important. So you don't become a job hugger or you don't stay somewhere for too long. You actually recognize that, okay, it's not going to happen here. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's recognizing that it might just not happen here and I need to go elsewhere to claim it. But having all of that experience under your belt, on your CV and your recommendations, that's invaluable. And you should claim that as much as you possibly can in whatever role you're working in.
And taking those 2 demotions as you described them, that was a strategic move to ultimately get you to where you wanted to be.
Correct. And it was a demotion in both salary and title, but both were reclaimed within 9 months. And so that was because I could see the potential. It was a better business or a better sector or a better international role that meant that I could grow quicker, demonstrate my skills, capabilities, and competencies. But on paper, it was great because I had an amazing executive search partner in Australia at the time, and we sat down and wargamed how that would look on my CV, and we wargamed about how quickly could I recoup the ground I would have to lose in order to make it happen. And I can't undervalue or underline enough just how important it is to have a great executive search partner, because that person stays with you with your career. And I was very lucky that he backed me into that role, because that's the role where I ended up as an international global comms director, even though I took a demotion. He knew the commercial ounce it would give me would put me at any C-suite table moving forward. And he was absolutely right.
And it was a calculated move that absolutely paid off.
Absolutely.
And you're right, having that support and having someone who understands it from the other side of the table in terms of, should I do this? Well, this is how it's, if you do take that risk, as it were, this is how it's likely to pan out for your career going forward. What about visibility and personal reputation in terms of securing a senior role? How important do you think that is?
Yeah. So I'd say 3 things on this. First of all, never underestimate the amount of research somebody will do on you before you even walk in a room.
Yeah.
And nowadays, that's across LinkedIn, LLMs like ChatGPT, if you're a senior stakeholder, word of mouth, even basic media coverage. Having an understanding of how you're represented in those is really important the more senior you get. So knowing how you show up in a Google search, knowing how you show up on Instagram, knowing how you show up in a chat GPT. Really interesting now, Google pulls a lot of user-generated content now from LinkedIn. So even if I go to do a basic Google search on me, it will pull a lot of my LinkedIn content together and give you a summary of me. And so my reputation usually arrives before anyone's ever met me. And so making sure you have deep clarity on that and then have influenced that in a way that you want to show up, it is job number one. Job number two is internally about your PR, and that is about what your team says about you, what your managers say about you, how you show up in meetings, how you listen, how you collaborate. I've always been a very big fan of working for businesses that have KPIs based on what, but then how. And how is so important for an internal leader. You can deliver amazing commercial gains, but if nobody wants to work with you because you're horrible, that's not a great situation for anybody. So again, making sure actions match words, I think, is really important in how you show up as a leader. I remember once, very, very, very young in my career, I was working on a crisis and I ran through the building to get to the CEO. And the CEO said to me, even if the building is burning, we always walk with purpose. We never run. Because it gives off a vibe. And he was so accurate. I do a lot of training actually with Fortune 500 leaders in body language and nonverbal communication. All of that's really important. And then the final thing I think is just celebrating achievement of your team, achievement for you, achievement for the business, and being that person who really is that celebratory, recognition driven leader that helps you communicate your achievements, but the achievements of everybody, I think, is really important as well.
Yeah, very well articulated there. And if you were giving advice to people, so we've talked about visibility and their kind of their personal reputation, but if people want to be considered as the strongest possible person for that senior leadership role, is there any other advice that you would share, things maybe that have been shared with you that you found useful, that are going to help people that are looking to make that sort of senior leadership step?
I think continual investment in your own progress is really important. I think we over rely on business training courses to help us do that. So some level of personal investment, whether that's upskilling in AI, if it's upskilling in commercial fundamentals or geopolitics, there are so many resources online that you can either pay what you can afford for training or Open University, etc. There's so many courses. It doesn't have to be a big INSEAD program or Harvard program, although they're good. It can just be something that is a topic of choice for that month. I want to be better at presentation skills. I want to be better at, one of the ones I see a lot of in women is I want to have better vocal flex. I want to lose my warbles. I want to present more confidently because that helps me have gravitas in a room. Simple things like that. I had one of my clients actually put themselves on an improv course because they hated answering questions on the spot. So they went and did an improvisation course for a weekend. It cost them maybe 80 quid to do it, but it helped them feel more confident in the moment. So that constant personal investment in your personal growth, I think, is really important and actually demonstrates your commitment to a better professional future, more so than taking yourself off on a kind of industry sponsored sojourn to Provence or something. That actually, for me, that you're giving up your personal time and you're learning and you're investing and you're constantly being curious is something I think that always stands the test of time.
I have to say the trip to Provence sounds quite nice as well.
I'm not going to pass it up, to be fair, but it doesn't have to cost a fortune. It can just be very simple steps.
Kerry, thank you. Fascinating to understand about your journey and that strategic approach that intentional choices, planning that's gone into it. And thank you for sharing your advice. I'm extremely grateful. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
No, I think just at the end of the day, it's all about self-belief and confidence. And there will be times when that is bruised and when those days don't go to plan or those roles don't go to plan. And I've had a couple of those as well.
Yep.
And I think resilience is one of our most underrated traits as leaders. And I think investing in methods and practices that help give you resilience, emotional and mental health resilience, is really important in order to feel valued and contributing effectively at that top table. And so, yeah, I suppose my last piece of advice is never let the resilience and mental health, emotional stability suffer from a lack of preparation on that.
Amazing. Kerry, thank you for your time. Thank you for your answers and for being so open and sharing with us. And I wish you every continued success with your fantastic business.
Thank you so much, Susie, for having me.